Three friends boarded Disney's Galactic Starcruiser to seek their destiny and emerged as heroes of the Halcyon. Welcome to Heroes of the Halcyon, your source for podcast goodness about Disney's Galactic Starcruiser. I'm Galactic Starcruiser superfan Drew, and with me are...
Superfan Martin.
And... Superfan Christine.
Thank you for joining us, Martin and Christine. As though we don't have, a regular recording of our podcast, but it's all good. For our topic today, one thing I've been fascinated about looking at Galactic Starcruiser for the last few months, and last couple of years, frankly, is why all the hate existed before people had even stepped one foot in the ship. I am fascinated by the fact that before anybody had actually seen this thing, a whole cottage industry sprung up where people were yelling and screaming back and forth about what they hated.
Pitchforks out.
Pitchforks, yeah. They were ready to, if Kathleen Kennedy was standing too close to somebody, she was going to have 3 holes poked in her. So we broke down some subtopics about it. So Martin, why don't you talk about one of the first things we mentioned, why we think there's so much hate initially?
I have to say that, if you're going to talk about why the hate for Galactic Starcruiser, you can't not begin with the initial marketing just was off. We love Starcruiser, we absolutely adore it, but the initial pieces that we were shown looked wrong. Just they were poorly produced. The tone was really odd. I mean, we all saw the video with Josh D'Amaro, doing the lightsaber training several months before it opened, and it just looked so unwieldy. He looked really uncomfortable, swinging a stick around at some poorly, photographed beams of light. It just came off really silly, in my opinion. I mean, having been there, I know how amazing it is, but you can't get around that first look didn't inspire a lot of confidence.
So you're talking about if I remember correctly, the Josh D'Amaro lightsaber video, wasn't that the first real, wasn't that before the legendarily bad promo video?
Yes, this was several months earlier.
So what was it about the Josh D'Amaro stuff that looked bad to you?
It didn't look fun. Truly, it looked like some guy standing there really uncomfortably swinging a toy lightsaber around. I mean, having been in lightsaber training, you get an idea of how hard it really would be to accurately photograph and represent what it is. But whoever produced that particular segment really failed in portraying it in a positive, exciting, or fun way. It just looked cheap and silly.
Part of the challenge is that it looked like it was for preschoolers.
It really did.
And this really should have been marketed to everyone. If they wanted to be a family type experience, they weren't involving adults in the initial interaction. Adults were doing the lightsaber training, but it really looked juvenile whenever they were doing it.
And as I recall, the person who was demonstrating it to Josh, that wasn't a Saja. Wasn't that a creator, an Imagineer who worked on it?
I believe that's correct, or one of the Disney brass. But it was definitely not a Saja.
So that would make it more of a clinical thing. Here is something we do, and so Josh D'Amaro, maybe he's a hell of an executive, but he's not really a great maybe actor or someone to sales put off. Well, that segues into the next thing, Christine, the infamous video with the actor from the Goldbergs. I know I forget this child's name, this kid actor, but
yeah, what is his name?
I don't know. We actually really like the Goldbergs. We think this particular performer is fantastic in that show. We don't have a problem with his acting skills, but in that piece, he was just so falsely enthusiastic.
Painful. Grossly overacted to the point where it felt like he's obviously covering up something. Like almost like he had the realization that this was, again, I go back to juvenile, but very elementary, and felt the need to overact it to really show how amazing it was when it possibly wasn't.
And how about I should have written down the people who were in this video. I know the other person was a head Imagineer who basically was explaining it to the actor. She also didn't come across as authentic to me.
No, it didn't.
She seemed a little forced and a little fake. I'm sure she was clearly excited about the experience, and I'm sure she was clearly couldn't wait to show us all, and knew that once people got on it, it'd be amazing. But she seemed a little forced in her the way she came across in that video too.
Yeah, and I think that, again, I can understand, given the fact that there's no experience like this anywhere on Earth, a 2-day, 24/7 interactive experience live in a fictional universe. It is difficult to sell. I can empathize with, how do you sell something that hasn't ever been sold before? But yeah, they definitely tonally missed it. But Christine, I'm going to go back to the point you made a little bit ago, is that it was skewed so young. The marketing was. It was, and I hadn't really thought about that, but that's a great point, is that it was, you don't need to convince a 7-year-old to go on a Star Wars adventure that costs thousands of dollars. You need to convince the 30, 40, 50-year-old that's going to take those kids to this several $1,000. And I don't feel like any of these early marketing pieces spoke to me. I'm an OG 1977 Star Wars fan. I just think these pieces were not aimed, and probably intentionally, but they did not hit me square in the heart the way I was hoping.
I mean, as a parent, I believe that I would look at that and think, why that and not just go to Galaxy's Edge? Galaxy's Edge feels like Star Wars, so why would I go to this experience as they marketed it? Why would that be any different?
Sure. Well, and I'll build on what you just said. One of the challenges that Disney had, obviously, and you mentioned this as well, Martin, was how do you market something that's no one has really ever gone through before?
Right.
How do you come across? And I think one of the easiest ways to do it is to try to go, well, what do people understand? What do people know? I hadn't heard of this Goldberg's actor kid, so I didn't know him. So I didn't know him from Adam when I saw him on I hope his name isn't Adam, because that'd be...
Actually, I think it is.
Oh, gosh. Well, anyway, the Goldberg kid. We'll just call him GK. Anyway, you have to go to the lowest common denominator. So that's how terms like the Star Wars Hotel came about. And that's how people kind of started making their own perception of what it was without actually understanding, because the journalists who were writing it up to produce content for their sites, they didn't know how to explain it to people. The people maybe who were explaining to those journalists, they didn't know how to explain it. The marketers clearly didn't know how. So I think that probably went a long way towards people going, this is going to be a bomb.
The conversation was so sidetracked by the mere phrase Star Wars Hotel, because then when, does it have a pool? Well, no, it doesn't have a pool. It's on a fictional spaceship, and no, it doesn't have a pool. And people, well, this other hotel has a pool. And when they announced the pricing, I can go to this other hotel for it's to call it a hotel. If you've been on it, of course, is terribly misrepresentative of the experience. Yeah, looking backwards, I can see how any conversation about the Star Wars Hotel really did not do this any favors at all.
Right, sure. When we were coming up with our subtopics, one of the things that I initially thought was part of marketing, but you mentioned it was kind of worthy of talking about on its own, was the aesthetics that was represented to us in the marketing. What were you saying about that, Martin?
Yeah, I have to say that personally, when I saw the bridge, for instance, we've all been on the bridge, it's astounding. But the first look we had on it, it didn't look like Star Wars. It looked like just some theme park representation of a generic spaceship. Now, again, you don't factor in that this has got to hold up to children and adults banging on it 24/7, 365. But it didn't look Star Wars to me. The corridors looked vaguely Star Wars, but when you walk into Galaxy's Edge, the overall feeling of this is Star Wars for me is overwhelming. The je ne sais quoi of what you feel when you walk past, Doc Ondars and Ronto Roasters, and it feels like Star Wars. I've never seen any of those things on the screen in a Star Wars film or TV show, but it feels absolutely authentic to what I feel Star Wars is to me. And none of the images I was seeing of the locations in Starcruiser felt like Star Wars to me. And even the character images themselves, the first promo image we had of the concept art for the captain, for instance, looked silly to me. It looked like a costume party rather than a Star Wars adventure. And again, boy, anyone that's been on Starcruiser, the performances are so astounding that this, the cast member they have, playing the captain, for instance, is so captivating. Absolutely, I would follow that character into the ends of the galaxy. She's so captivating. But on paper, the first images we saw, it looked cheap. It looked silly to me.
So the aesthetics, why did she look silly? But if you look at a picture of a Twi'lek without any former, would that look more Star Wars to you? I mean, maybe it's impossible to say since you're obviously so versed in what a Twi'lek is, and that's clearly Star Wars.
Like for instance, let's just go back to the captain again. I adore this character, having been on the voyage, but it felt more, looking at the image, the concept art of the character, it looked more Fifth Element to me than Star Wars.
Okay.
A lot of the character, it looked far more Fifth Element than Star Wars. The dining room, it looked cool, the concept art that we saw. Did it look Star Wars? Not really. And again, how they pulled it off is amazing. And the minute you walk onto that ship, you are in Star Wars. Flat out 100%. But the original things we saw didn't resonate with me as being anything Star Wars.
Well, clearly not just with you, but with a lot of people. One of the things that's difficult about aesthetics is, of course, it's all subjective. To me, I was able to go, oh, that's a captain. I never thought, oh, that looks cheap or Fifth Element. I could see where some Fifth Element stuff could be pulled, I guess. But for me personally, it didn't make me... I didn't find it not Star Wars enough, but clearly a lot of people did. Judging from again, I'm thinking of YouTube thumbnails. There are several people who had YouTube thumbnails where they were making fun of specifically Captain Kevin looking with crazy eyes and stuff. So, well, Christine, can you think of anything else in the aesthetics? Martin mentioned the bridge, mentioned some of the character designs and so forth. Was there anything aesthetically when you first saw that maybe you thought, no, this isn't going to work, this isn't going to look good?
Well, the one thing that stood out whenever we started to see some of the first pieces of marketing material was Gaia. And the way that they presented her, there wasn't anything that happened before or after her snippet of her performance that tied her into anything else on the voyage. So it was as if it was like, okay, we've got lightsabers and we've got a bridge and we've got a singer. It's like, well, okay, but how does that all fit into a story that I'm supposed to care about?
I think that's a super good point. You just have, oh, it's Twi'lek. Okay, it's Star Wars. Great. And she's singing. Remember when that other Twi'lek was singing in that other movie you liked 20, 30 years ago? But the look of the character, since there wasn't any of the backstory about her being Gaia, the superstar of the I remember the Imagineer woman did mention some of that, but that didn't mean anything.
Yeah.
There was no story. It was literally just her appearance.
I think they did the adventure a disservice by focusing more on the experience of the lightsaber and the bridge, as opposed to, let's introduce you to these characters that you're going to interact with for 48 hours. You are going to become a part of their story. So let's give you a little bit of their story. They could have given us a snippet, enough just to get us enticed and interested without giving away any of the plot points.
Gotcha.
That, I think, would have been a benefit to pull people in earlier and say, okay, that does sound like Star Wars. That does feel like Star Wars.
It's almost like they put up a whiteboard and they said, all right, Jones, I want to brainstorm. Let's think of everything that has Star Wars. What? Oh, lightsabers? Yeah. A blue shrimp? Sure. Twi'lek. We got to put a Twi'lek. and so they were maybe trying to hit those points to maybe talk to people and go, Star Wars, see Star Wars.
Right.
But there was enough on the other aesthetics that you mentioned, Martin, that steered you and perhaps other people away, and thus a lot of hatred was directed at the experience. Makes sense.
And it makes sense, too, that they needed to be able to market to the masses and not just to Star Wars fans or to science fiction fans or to a certain age group. Makes perfect sense the why, but I think they missed the opportunity on steering a little bit of that marketing more towards the people who would have likely jumped on board first to get their buy-in, to start to get others excited about this prior to getting on the ship.
Well, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the one thing that most haters really bring up right away, which is the high cost of the experience.
Right.
What kind of things do you think that high cost put in people's heads, Christine?
Well, because there's already a large group of people that feel that Disney just kind of milks people for every dollar they've got between the parks and the movies and Disney Plus and all that. When the price tag came out, I think a lot of people would have looked at that and thought, here goes Disney again, just trying to jump into my pocket and taking advantage of the fact that I'm a Star Wars fan and thinking that I'm just going to shell this money out without a second thought.
It's almost like Mickey Mouse was saying, I know you like Star Wars, do you? Well, here I got something for you, but you're going to have to pay $6,000.
Yeah, not good.
And this is where, the whole Star Wars hotel conversation really did its damage, because people are going, well, I can stay at the Grand Floridian for half this price.
Right.
And it's such a not apples to apples comparison. It couldn't be further apart of a comparison. But the moment that the price tag came out, people said, but I can do this with that. I can do that with the money. The fact is, you can't do anything like this on planet Earth anywhere else.
Right.
This is its own thing. But the cost was an immediate barrier to a lot of folks that simply can't afford it. And I have to say, I can empathize. If I couldn't afford to have gone on Starcruiser, I'd feel a little bit salty. I can understand where some of that is coming from.
Right.
So that might inspire people to say, oh, it's just Disney trying to pull money out of our pockets and not present anything. This is just another example of them being greedy. So the high cost brings high expectations, certainly. And part of the problem is those expectations. To echo some of what you were saying earlier, Martin, this didn't look Star Warsy to you. You had a certain expectation about what an experience was going to be a Star Wars labeled experience. And the aesthetics and the way it was presented to you at first didn't feed into that expectation that you would have for an experience like this, I'm assuming.
That's absolutely correct. I mean, it was an expensive trip for us. It's an expensive trip for us to go again. Highly expensive. We're sacrificing to do this. For us personally, the cost was a gulp, in our throat. But then we were like, no, let's figure out how do we do this. But for someone that simply doesn't have the means, that would be a very bitter pill to swallow.
And definitely inspire some ill will. So then let's take the expectations highway down a little ways. For a lot of people, I imagine the hatred came from not just Disney wrecked Star Wars, although I'm certain that's part of it, but the expectation of what Star Wars is. Those expectations probably played a small part, I imagine.
Not for me personally, they didn't, but I did see that. I mean, I can understand, some people want Galaxy's Edge to be in a different time period than it is. I mean, Galaxy's Edge is specifically set between episodes, 8 and 9. Right in that time period, and some folks would prefer it be in the original trilogy time frame, and so there is some dissatisfaction there. But that die was already cast. I mean, they can't have the Halcyon be in a different time frame than Galaxy's Edge and still maintain an excursion, which is an integral part of the experience. So that's something that Disney really would have a problem changing down the line.
And again, like we had said before, it's your Star Wars is your Star Wars. It's similar to us, when we talk about our Star Wars, it's going to be, 4, 5, and 6. There are kids that are younger than us that it's 1, 2, and 3. And that initial angst in the beginning of how can that be Star Wars and how can you like that? And what do you mean you haven't seen it's that same kind of feeling that when we're looking at the initial marketing and saying, well, that doesn't look like Star Wars. Why would I pay for that? That doesn't look like the Star Wars that I am expecting to see. And so it was difficult, and I can see where it could be difficult for people to get past that and think, no, this is just another piece of Star Wars, even though it's not, quote unquote, my Star Wars. And is it worth the price? Is it worth the price to go outside of your comfort zone and to learn something new in a galaxy far, far away and experience what could be, we had kids on board that this is going to be an integral part of their Star Wars story. It's now an integral part of ours too.
So yeah, it's some kids' first Star Wars experience, absolutely. And I saw all those kids, and I'm very jealous of them having this be one of their first experiences with Star Wars. That was cool. But to the aesthetics and keeping on the juvenile aspects, some of the materials kind of were skewed a little bit juvenile, wouldn't you say, Martin?
Yeah, again, we all understand that Star Wars is going to be something that is for kids. It was intended for kids originally. We want kids to enjoy this. But at the same time, think back to the first concept art we saw of the engineering room. This is a specific, highly marketed piece of the experience ahead of time. And the concept art was strictly kids' playground. It looked like a kids' playground. There was barely no adults in that piece at all. And I'm like, so a significant piece of this experience is really, really, really skewing very, very young. And I don't think that was really representative of the end product. I mean, sure. I mean, I thought the engineering room was a lot of fun. Again, did it skew young at parts? Sure. Is that okay? We want kids to enjoy this experience. But I was also concerned personally that there was no anywhere on this ship that was just for adults.
Well, except for the sublight lounge.
Even kids, but see, that's the thing, is I was concerned because there isn't even a time in the sublight lounge that it's just for people, 18 and up, 21 and up, whatever. I was just concerned that it was going to be, even on a Disney cruise ship, there are certain areas that are adults only at certain given points of time.
Yes.
And I just wanted to know that there was going to be some piece of this experience that was intended strictly for the adult Star Wars fans to really engage each other without those distractions. And I didn't see that happening. And as it turned out, there is no area like that or time like that during this experience.
Come to the sublight lounge.
Come to the
Adults only.
Yeah, what happens on the Halcyon.
But there are parts of the experience that, they involve the kids in doing something like, let's go over here and play with droids. And then the adults will be, focused on something else. So it's not like as an adult, you spent your entire time being surrounded by children. And the cast is phenomenal in crowd control, especially when it comes to kids. So at least once you're there, you do have the feeling that as an adult, you can be an adult and have adult conversations and interact with other adults. It wasn't just so kid-friendly that you felt ostracized with that one.
Well, let's go to the other elephant in the room that we came up with when we discussed why all the hate initially for this. And I think that's just plain and simple that hate sells. On YouTube, it's so much easier to have a graphic that shows a skewed picture of Kevin and Wraith and then put a headline that says, look how Disney's screwed the pooch again, or something to that effect. So I think that's another big part of it, is that the hate existed because hate is what gets clicks. What do you think, Martin?
Pure. I mean, right now, if you go on YouTube right now, it's covered with videos about how Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind is terrible because that's the new ride that just opened. I bet it's an amazing ride. I can't wait to ride the thing. But it's coded in videos that just say it's terrible before virtually anyone's been able to get on it, simply because that's what's going to get people to click. I completely agree. No matter what is put forth, there's going to be some negative videos around it just because
hate sells.
Hate sells.
Well, to wrap up the episode, I'm going to throw a monkey in the wrench and talk about something we didn't talk about previously. We know that Disney can't do a whole lot about the high cost of the experience. They've got to pay for the actors, they got to pay for the food, they got to pay for everything. So there's not a whole lot that Disney can do about that. But they certainly could do something about the marketing to make, instead of hate selling, maybe put a little bit more love out in the world. Christine, what's an example that you could think of that Disney might be able to do now that people have gone on the ship? What do you think Disney can do to put out a positive spin on this in their marketing versus what they did to begin with?
Currently, they have several new books, comics, and the books and comics are skewed towards adults and towards kids that are all part of High Republic. And I know that the Halcyon is mentioned at different points during this High Republic portion of this new Star Wars that's come out. There's even a Halcyon comic book. There's even a Galaxy's Edge comic book. So why not do something with these characters that we've met on the ship in other adventures on the ship? Do something that introduces the characters, that takes them into a different light, that gives you a little bit of an idea of who they are, maybe before you get on the ship.
How about you, Martin?
I have to tell you that I have seen a dramatic, improvement in the general consensus about Starcruiser since it's opened. Simply because every 2 days, several hundred more people walk off this thing having just had the experience of a lifetime. And we're telling every single person we know how amazing this is. Go do it right now. We are the best marketing that Disney can possibly have. But I still think that their commercials and their advertising needs to bring it home. Something that really says this is different. This is unique. There's nowhere else on the whole planet you can go to have an adventure like this one.
So to key on the uniqueness of the experience and really focus on the elements that this has that you can't find anywhere else on the world.
I agree. I mean, I think that it's so much of this experience is the there-ness of it. I still think that if you just look at a still, the aesthetic may not look Star Wars-y. When you're standing there, it all sells. It all works. It's all magic. It is hard to capture in a promo. I understand that. But I think that they just need to hammer down, this isn't a hotel. This is an experience. This is an adventure.
So did you guys see the video that came out as kind of a reaction to the Goldberg video several weeks later that was the roundtable with the Imagineers discussing the experience?
I got to tell you, that actually gave me a lot of hope that they were on the right track. I think that was a really well done piece that they didn't show a lot, but what they were talking about really spoke to me. As someone that really wanted this thing to be amazing, they were saying all the right words about, where their design, goals were and what they were trying to accomplish, and the groundbreaking technology. And I walked out of that piece really, really inspired that we could be in for something really special.
It does occur to me that maybe after this thing's a year old, we're talking first quarter 2023 or something, the inevitable Disney Plus series that goes behind the scenes and digs into it is probably a way for them to first make some content for Disney Plus, and two, maybe actually tie into their, hey, here's an experience that you can't have anywhere else, and let me show you a little bit about what went into making it. Maybe that's something that they could do.
I'm speaking directly to Mickey Mouse right now.
What are you saying?
Sell me Starcruiser action figures, model sets. Let's get a Disney Plus series. I want to buy everything Starcruiser. I want a play set. I want Starcruiser the breakfast cereal.
So, Martin, it sounds almost like you're a toy collector. I'm just thinking.
We say that as we're looking at a wall of toys. Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, just to get more out there, just to flood the zone with quality merchandise or something that tells the story and gets across the aspect that this is a unique experience with unique characters that you're going to fall in love with, you're going to wish you could hang out with and take pictures with as frequently as possible.
I'm not sure how they, I haven't really thought about this, but something that I think they kind of need to say is this isn't just fun. How emotional the impact is. You could show a clip of a kid hugging Chewbacca, and everyone goes, oh, and gets the feels about hugging Chewbacca. But I mean, you really feel a connection to these characters. That's an area that I think that they haven't really fully exploited as to its extent. I mean, they really need to show these are characters that you really come to care about.
I just want my Gaia CD.
Where's our Gaia CD?
Absolutely. That to me seems such low-hanging fruit.
Yes.
So,
why were they not selling that right there? I mean,
well, I appreciate you guys humoring me. I know that a lot of the topics we like to talk about are what we love about the experience and what we want others to love. But something that I find fascinating, again, is the meta-narrative around what Disney is selling with this experience, how they've sold it, how they've made mistakes. I think that that's super fascinating. So I appreciate you humoring me so that we can talk about why all the hate. But with that, I think we're ready to wrap things up. Christine, if people wanted to send ideas for future shows or talk about what they hate or what they love, how would they reach out to us? You
can always email us at heroesofthehalcyon@gmail.com. And you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Heroes of the Halcyon.
Well, Starcruiser Superfans, it's always fun to shoot the poodoo and talk everything Galactic Starcruiser. So until next episode, it's our honor. Let's raise our glasses to Booty!